He was the most feared drug lord walking alive on American streets. The cops bow before his power to receive their shares.
Where's your backup?
His empire seemed unimpeachable until a quiet detective appeared in the city to destroy his cartel on that particular eve.
Huh? Come on.
Welcome back to Paramount Recapped. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me. The movie kicks off with a pretty disturbing scene. Some gang members are burning a man alive, even though he's begging them to stop. Nobody steps in to help him. Then the focus shifts to this powerful gangster named Bumpy, who's out there handing out food to a bunch of struggling people. It's like a charity event, and he's got his right-hand guy, Frank, watching silently from the crowd with this serious look on his face. Bumpy notices Frank standing there and calls him over so they can have a private word. As the two of them walk down the street, Bumpy starts ranting about how the country is falling apart financially. He's like, things are changing so fast, you can't even figure out what's going on anymore. They step into a local shop while still talking, and out of nowhere, Bumpy suddenly clutches his chest. He's having a heart attack. Frank starts panicking and yells at the store owner to call an ambulance, but no one does anything. Despite Frank's efforts, Bumpy doesn't make it. He dies right there in the store. At Bumpy's funeral, it's clear how much of a big deal he was. All kinds of people show up, other gangsters, powerful folks, people from the neighborhood. The news channels report on his passing, painting him as this complex figure. To the locals, he was a legend, someone who gave back and protected the neighborhood. But to the authorities, he was just another criminal. He passed away at 62, and for over 40 years, people in Harlem looked up to him. Meanwhile, inside the funeral parlor, the mood isn't exactly respectful. A lot of the people there are just using the funeral as a chance to catch up or network. It's more of a social event than anything. One guy named Tango even treats Frank like a servant, telling him to go fetch a lighter. "Go get me a light while you're up," he says. Frank doesn't respond or show any anger. He just lets it go. Then someone else walks up to Frank, offering his condolences and telling him something important. He says that Bumpy had asked him to make sure Frank was taken care of if anything ever happened to him. "Bumpy might not have told you," he says, "but he made me promise I'd look out for you." Now the story jumps over to a cop named Richie. He's trying to study law while still working cases. During a drug investigation with his partner, Jay, Richie stumbles across a truck loaded with $1 million in cash, totally by accident. Jay thinks they should just keep it and not tell anyone. But Richie's got a strong moral compass, so he decides to turn it in to the department, even though his colleagues give him weird looks for doing the right thing. What Richie doesn't know is that one of the senior officers, Detective Trupo, is secretly working with drug dealers. Frank finds out about Trupo's shady side through some Italian connections. Meanwhile, Frank meets with Tango again, but Tango isn't interested in working with him now that Bumpy's gone. That moment kind of pushes Frank to make a decision. He's going to jump into the drug game himself. To get things rolling, Frank calls his cousin Nate, who's based in Thailand and has military connections. He pulls out $400,000 from the bank and flies out to meet Nate. Around the same time, Richie's personal life is falling apart. His wife decides she's leaving the state and taking their son with her. She also says she wants a divorce. Richie's under a ton of pressure. He's got to deal with that and study for his law exams at the same time. Once Frank lands in Bangkok, he teams up with Nate to figure out how to score a serious amount of heroin. Nate tells him it's not possible to get that much from just one source. He'll have to piece it together from different suppliers. But Frank's not into that plan. He wants to deal with the main guy directly. So they head out into the jungle to meet the top drug producer. At first, the guy doubts Frank can pull it off. He doesn't believe he can smuggle 100 kilos of heroin into America. But Frank's confidence wins him over, and they strike a deal. Nate is put in charge of getting the product safely back to the U.S. While all that's going on, Richie's partner, Jay, starts messing with drugs himself. Things go south when Jay kills a small-time dealer, and an angry crowd almost tears him apart. Richie steps in and saves him, but he makes it clear he won't be covering for him. He's still sticking to his morals. Back in New York, Frank picks up the first shipment at the airport. A lab tech checks it out and confirms it's pure stuff. No mixing, no dilution, just straight heroin. Frank starts distributing the product all over the city, calling it Blue Magic. He's careful to stay under the radar, keeping things low-key, but soon enough, overdose deaths spike like crazy. The government starts to panic. Drug addiction is now being called the country's biggest enemy. So they quietly set up a special narcotics team and secretly ask Richie to lead it. Meanwhile, Frank's living it up. He buys a mansion for his mom and brings all his family members together. Then he brings his brothers into the business too and even settles an old score by killing Tango in broad daylight. Richie puts together a small task force to dig into blue magic and where it's coming from. Around this time, Frank goes to a party and ends up falling for a Puerto Rican beauty queen named Eva. But before he can really focus on her, he spots one of his brothers wearing a super expensive suit that screams, "I'm rich." Frank pulls him aside and scolds him for being flashy. The loudest guy in a room is usually the weakest, he warns. He's serious about staying under the radar. Later, Frank finally introduces himself to Eva and starts getting to know her. Things move fast. He even brings her home to meet his mom, which is kind of a big deal. She makes a good impression, and soon they're acting like a real couple. A few months go by, and Frank's business blows up. He opens drug hubs in different places: New Jersey, Queens, North Carolina, Brooklyn, you name it. The money starts pouring in like crazy. One wealthy businessman even helps him corner the entire drug market, basically giving Frank a monopoly. At one point, Frank proposes to Eva, and she gives him a fancy fur coat as a gift. He likes it, though he's not super expressive about it. To celebrate, they go to this major boxing match that's crawling with celebrities, politicians, and all kinds of influential people. Frank is there too, dressed sharp in an expensive fur coat that turns heads. But he's not the only one watching. Richie, the determined cop, is also in the crowd. And when he sees how everyone's showing respect to Frank, acting like he owns the place, it gets Richie's attention big time. Something doesn't sit right with him. Who is this guy? Richie starts digging, trying to figure out who Frank really is, but oddly enough, no one in the system knows anything about him. Frank's pretty much a ghost. This just makes Richie even more curious. Meanwhile, Frank ends up marrying Eva, his girlfriend, and everything seems to be going great. But on their wedding day, things take a turn. While they're riding in a car, Captain Trupo, the dirty cop who runs a special narcotics squad, stops them. Trupo's been watching Frank ever since that flashy fur coat at the boxing match, and now wants a cut of his cash. He basically tells Frank that nothing goes unnoticed. After that little run-in, Frank goes home and burns the fur coat. He's angry at himself for drawing attention. He's always tried to keep his operation low-key, but now that spotlight is on him, and there's no turning back. Richie's investigation now shifts into high gear, especially after his team starts tailing Frank's family. That's when they start uncovering how deep Frank's drug operation really goes. One day, while Frank and one of his brothers are heading home from meeting, they get pulled over by Captain Trupo again. This time, Trupo finds a stash of heroin in their car. Frank is furious at his brother for being so careless and lets him have it right there in the street. What Frank doesn't realize is that Richie is secretly tailing them and witnesses everything. Richie's starting to put more of the puzzle together, but his friend warns him not to go after Frank. Apparently, Frank has ties with politicians and powerful people. You don't mess with a guy like that, his friend says. But Richie doesn't back down. He decides he's going to bring Frank down no matter what. Soon after, someone tries to take Frank out. While he and Eva are walking together, they come under fire, and although they survive, the attack rattles the family. Frank's brothers immediately think their rival, Nikki, is behind it, but Frank isn't convinced. Eva suggests they leave the country for safety, but Frank refuses. "This is my home. I'm not running," he says. At the same time, there's big news on TV. American troops are being pulled out of Vietnam and Thailand. This hits Frank hard because that's where he's been getting his heroin. Without the military connections, smuggling is going to get a lot trickier. So he contacts his cousin Nate and asks for a massive shipment, 2,000 kilos. Nate tells him it's not going to be that easy anymore. Still, Frank decides to fly out to Thailand one last time to figure it out himself. Back home, Richie gets lucky. He witnesses one of Frank's cousins shoot a young girl, and they threaten to send him to jail. Scared, the cousin agrees to wear a wire and spy on Frank's operation. Around the same time, Frank's in Thailand trying to find a new way to ship drugs into the US. Since military planes are no longer an option, he starts brainstorming other ways to get the product across. During a phone call to his brother about an upcoming shipment, Frank doesn't realize the call is being listened to. Thanks to the wire on Jimmy, the cousin, Richie and his team hear every word. They figure out that another batch of heroin is arriving, possibly through military channels. So when the plane touches down, Richie is there with a search warrant ready to tear it apart. They go through everything. Every inch of the plane is checked, and they find absolutely nothing. Just when they're about to give up, Richie decides to take a look inside one of the coffins that's supposed to be carrying fallen soldiers for Vietnam. All he finds is the body of a soldier. An officer shows up and chews Richie out for even suggesting that the military might be used to smuggle drugs. He gets real mad, saying there's no way someone like Frank, especially a black man, could pull off something so huge and sophisticated. While this is happening, Captain Trupo and his crooked team pay Frank's house a visit. They storm in and rough up his wife and mom, trying to find any hidden cash. Eventually, they stumble upon a massive stash hidden in the doghouse outside. Richie isn't done yet. Still watching the movement of those military coffins, he keeps tracking them until he finally cracks it. The heroin is being hidden in secret compartments built into the caskets. His team follows a truck moving the drugs and eventually tracks it to a warehouse. With that info, Richie quickly gets a warrant and backup. The raid begins. Cops swarm the place, and chaos breaks out as Frank's men open fire. One of Frank's brothers tries to escape, but Richie chases him down and arrests him. Not long after, they bust Frank while he's sitting in a church pew, acting like nothing's wrong. They seize all his properties and bust open every one of his drug distribution spots. In court, Frank is labeled as one of the most dangerous criminals in the country. One day after a hearing, Frank manages to get a moment alone with Richie. He tries to talk him into dropping the charges, maybe even offering a deal. But Richie stands his ground. He's not letting this one go. Seeing no other way out, Frank decides to turn informant. He promises to give up the names of corrupt cops, politicians, and other big shots who helped him run his empire. In return, Richie says he'll make sure Frank gets better treatment in prison. Frank's info is explosive. Thanks to what he shares, dozens of high-level officers are arrested. Even Captain Trupo, realizing the walls are closing in, takes his own life before he can be arrested. Richie later thanks Frank for all the help, but that doesn't erase his crimes. Eventually, Frank is sentenced to 70 years in prison. Authorities seize over $250 million worth of his assets. A huge chunk of the Drug Enforcement Agency is exposed, and about 30 of Frank's family members end up doing time. Eva, heartbroken, returns to Puerto Rico. As for Richie, he leaves the police force and becomes Frank's attorney. Since Frank helped bust so many others, his sentence is reduced to 15 years. In 1991, he's finally released. When Frank steps out of prison, Richie is there waiting for him. They walk side by side down a city street. Everything has changed. The buildings, the people, the world. None of it looks like the place Frank remembered. And just like that, a chapter closes on the life of one of the most powerful drug lords New York ever saw.